Welcome to this presentation of Developing Teacher Leadership by Employing an Improvement Science Framework for Organizational Problem Solving. My name is Rebecca Ensley. I am currently serving as the principal of Jackson County Early College, and I am a doctoral candidate in the Educational Leadership Program at Western Carolina University. The work I'm going to be sharing with you today is taken from a chapter I co-authored with my faculty sponsor and disquisition chair, Dr. Robert Crow. Dr. Crow is an assistant professor of educational research in the Educational Leadership Program at Western Carolina University. So we're going to be looking at positional and traditional leadership roles versus empowering non-traditional leaders as organizational improvers. And the chapter that we are presenting here today is part of a journal that examines this very phenomenon, the presence and impact of those working in educational organizations in roles that are not traditionally considered leadership roles or titles. So before we get into the case study, though, we'd like to explore the historical evolution of school-level leadership roles, both formal and informal. The origins of the role of school-level principal can be traced back to the days of the one-room schoolhouse, where an individual referred to as a principal teacher held the position. Stakeholders worked alongside the teacher to make decisions that best served school and students. However, as America's schools evolved, leadership roles moved from the classroom environment to occupying office suites, often located away from the classroom. The geographic change of power locale spurred the development of a new type of leadership role having the potential to be fulfilled by classroom teachers. While those who work closest with students, America's classroom teachers, are essential in functioning as our new non-traditional leaders, they are largely ill-equipped with leadership-oriented strategies and tools from teacher preparation programs to improve organizations. This case study illustrates the type of professional scaffolding that allows for the development of evidence-based leadership practice as organizational improver by describing how the teacher leader can instrumentally contribute to institutional quality. The narrative presents a school-wide improvement project detailing ways that teacher leaders can learn to apply improvement science frameworks as tools of institutional improvement leadership. The case highlights the use of three approaches for describing a theory of improvement: the initial construction of a causal systems analysis, the articulation of driver diagrams for depicting change ideas, and implementing the plan, do, study, act cycle as a method to gauge improvement efforts. These exemplars allow for learning new ways to establish a culture of collaborative leadership concerned with providing evidence-based measures around a school's designated goals. Leaders, not just as problem solvers, but also as problem finders, are often not the ones traditionally carrying designated leadership titles such as school principal or district superintendent. Because of the frequency of this non-traditional trajectory, professional preparation of those occupying non-traditional educational leadership roles happens haphazardly. One approach for moving toward creating a more inclusive decision-making organization is to cultivate a culture of collaborative leadership. In the collaborative leadership model, those who occupy the system hold the most valuable insights and use them to provide guidance toward tangible organizational improvements. State and district level mandates for continuous improvement and quality assurance, requisites for collaborative approaches to improvement across organizational contexts, and the demands for professional development provide a trifecta that, when combined, creates opportunities for staff to learn about evidence-based organizational problem solving. This illustrative case study presents a description of the rudimentary niches where non-traditional leadership roles and skills may be developed, and tells the story of how I leveraged opportunities for leadership development by coupling authentic practice with state-of-the-art frameworks for improvement. So just a little bit of history about Jackson County Early College, and to give you a little bit of context about our innovative setting. We are a public early college high school, and we are a part of the Jackson County Public Schools family. We are located on the campus of Southwestern Community College in Sylva, North Carolina. My faculty and staff are comprised of 9 individuals, 4 teachers, 1 lab facilitator, 1 college liaison, 1 high school counselor, 1 administrative assistant, 1 assistant secretary who is part-time, and myself, the principal. Until last year, we were part of the North Carolina New Schools Network and followed their impact planning process for continuous school improvement planning, which we will discuss later on in this presentation. Our students follow an all honors curriculum And our teachers utilize a common instructional framework, and this provides the foundational structure for all of the instructional practices that take place in our building. Our school-wide design and commitment to personalized experience for each student is also something we are committed to in every decision that we make. So a bit more about the impact planning model. The impact planning model is grounded in the research of continuous improvement planning cycles. There are 5 main phases of the process, and the work done at each phase is meant to inform the next phase in the cycle. The cycle begins by having the individuals involved gather data that will be used to inform their process of identifying an area of improvement needed in the organization's current practice. Once data have been collected, the teacher leaders engage in a self-assessment of the organization's practices and collectively score each area on a self-assessment rubric. The leadership team can incorporate the use of the causal systems diagram, such as a fishbone, to help them visually break down low-scoring areas and isolate problems contributing to low scores. Once the rubric is complete and the team has determined which area or areas to focus upon, they develop ideas for improvement. Then the group can make use of the driver diagram framework to outline their improvement ideas. After the improvement ideas related to the plan are developed, the implementation phase of the cycle begins. During the implementation, progress monitoring activities should be conducted at least every 90 days to assess the effectiveness of the change ideas that have been executed and to determine whether adjustments, continued adoption, or the need to abandon the idea is necessary. The frequency of monitoring these practices could be determined by the nature of the improvement initiative being implemented. At the conclusion of each school year, the teacher leadership team revisits the entire plan and all progress monitoring data to inform the development of the next cycle of improvement is looked at again. Now let's look at impact planning overload. While many of the strengths of the process were highlighted and certainly made for a stronger process for cooperative innovative high schools, there were many negatives to the process that we identified as we implemented it as a faculty over the past few years. One of those being the self-assessment rubric did not always give us clear results as to where the problem actually existed or the origins of the problem itself. That made it very difficult to isolate the problem or to know where to begin to even fix the problem. Also, when we develop goals, it would be hard to develop goals off of the results of the rubric and the discussion. That's how we would approach it, but it still remained very big. Our goals were so large and often felt very unattainable in a short period of time. This led to continual scaling or a feeling of always being in progress, and the results always showed that at every benchmark session. Consequently, my teachers began to feel that they were very exhausted. They felt that we never accomplished anything. We were always just progressing, always in progress, and it was very hard for them to see progress. This again led to further exhaustion, and they began to be much more resistant to take on leadership roles in their classroom or in the school and carry that responsibility due to feeling very overwhelmed or just feeling stuck. So as I began to look at our impact process and I considered how could we improve this, what I wanted to do was take us from looking at big, impactful goals that were not being achieved in small amounts of time and take us to a place where we could have small wins more often and feel victorious more frequently, and that therefore would fuel our energy and keep us going and keep us energized throughout the year. It would also allow my teachers to feel that they had more of a leadership role in the school and be more willing to take on more leadership roles as time went by. So my aim for our school became adopting a new model for improvement. The recursive nature of school improvement lends itself to the use of improvement science tools for continuous quality assurance. Addressing areas where organizational or institutional deficits exist provides opportunities for those in non-traditional leadership roles to develop and hone their leadership skills. With this idea in mind, I convened an initial meeting with my JCEC teacher leadership group to seize this opportunity. The purpose for the meeting was to begin the initial thinking regarding project formulation for addressing our annual task of our school improvement plan or impact planning. We wanted this improvement model to be focused on identifying where our problems actually existed, so we utilized a causal systems analysis. We also wanted to be certain that we were identifying specific components of the problem that can be fixed quickly and with existing resources. Therefore, they created quick wins They were the low-hanging fruit. We would be employing a PDSA cycle as a way to test our improvements, to implement them, test them, fail quickly if necessary, but fix them quickly as well. And these went into 30 to 45-day cycles, and they happened 2 to 3 times per semester. And then finally, I wanted to be sure that we provided opportunities for those in the non-traditional leadership roles in my school to develop and hone their leadership skills as action researchers conducting relevant research in their labs of practice. So our theory of improvement then became that through a collaborative approach to improvement, plus identifying smaller, more attainable aims and goals, and incorporating improvement science frameworks to solve our organizational problems, it would increase and equal the ownership and leadership of a school-wide improvement effort, and it would be shared by all. Now for identifying our problem. Through a causal systems analysis or fishbone diagram, we began to break out our problem. At this initial stage in the improvement initiative planning, the leadership team spent time discussing issues, dilemmas, and problems that the school was facing. Our discussion enabled our group to compile a list of potential aims and goals for the upcoming school year. Setting clear aims for our potential improvement initiatives allowed us to move to the next step, conducting a root cause analysis for determining the causal factors responsible for the issues, dilemmas, or problems that we identified. Often labeled a fishbone diagram, this causal systems map became our structural tool for collecting and organizing our current knowledge about our potential underlying causes for the complex organizational problems we were experiencing. Our causal systems analysis became our primary component when working in our organizational improvement efforts. In the early stage of any improvement initiative, this analysis should be conducted using current knowledge about potential causes for the identified problem. In doing so, barriers are identified that hamper the achievement of an outcome. The fishbone diagram allows ideas to be visually represented, literally allowing one to see the system that creates the problem, which takes us back to one of our core principles. So as we looked at our problem, we identified that our effect was that students who were less connected to their advisory groups struggled more in their classes, both college and high school. And we looked at the main causes to that as being disconnection and a lack of academic support structures within the school that were intentional. We considered that students disconnected from the school supports as they added more college courses, therefore spent more time outside of the school. Students struggled with connecting to the college instructors at times. Families also began to disconnect the longer their students were at the early college. This is not atypical in any high school setting. We also looked at 9th grade students specifically and realized that they too began to struggle as they made the adjustment to the rigor of a high school and a community college coursework at the same time. Students also did not always access the student support service resources that were being provided both through the high school and the college. And college instructors did not always communicate about students who were at risk of failing the course. We also needed to be sure that we were seeing the system that currently existed. We know that we have a college liaison in place full-time who is responsible for communicating between the college and the early college. We had a high school counselor that at the time was shared between us and another high school in the district. I was also actively involved in the student support services process. We also had house and advisory time, but the teachers identified quickly that the time had not been as functional as they'd liked for it to be, and there was never enough time to address all the needs. There was also the identification of inconsistent practices in each house, and it was very dependent on who the house teacher was. So through the discussion, the group determined that the school disconnectedness and the lack of academic support structures were the two primary obstacles blocking our overall improvement aim, personalization of the student experience. And as expressed in the previous diagram of our fishbone, these two perceived hindrances hypothesized to hamper the feelings of school connectedness. Specifically, students' lack of feelings of personalizations were due to a disconnect from the school and its culture and a perceived lack of academic supports in place for scaffolding academic success. We discussed two other categories, purpose and time, and they were identified in our notes, but we felt that the two primary areas were the disconnection from school and culture and a perceived lack of academic supports, and we decided to focus on those. Once our major causal factors had been determined, the next step in organizational improvement planning is to create a driver diagram driving us toward our improvements. The learning arising from completing the causal systems analysis leads the group to work on this driver diagram. The driver diagram improvement framework allows participants to display their theory of improvement as well as to organize their ideas in order to answer the question, what changes can we make that will result in improvement? A driver diagram is useful for articulating areas where change actions can be undertaken in an effort toward problem resolution. Driver diagrams are generally comprised of 4 elements, the first element being the outcome or aim of the overall improvement initiative. Once articulated, the aim statement guides all subsequent work. Second, primary drivers are crafted that represent major topical categories where, if changed or enhanced, would result in moving the needle toward achieving the project aim. In a typical project, 3 to 5 primary drivers are identified. Each of these drivers are subsequently broken down into a more granular subset of elements called secondary drivers. Aligned with each secondary driver are 2 to 3 change ideas written or stated in such a way that makes a change effort measurable. Because crafting descriptions of means to ends requires discussion and consensus building, dialoguing enables the group to establish a higher degree of shared understanding toward potential resolutions. In the driver diagramming activity, the teacher leaders were learning articulate responses to potential causes for the existence or perpetuation of problems identified. Flowing directly from the fishbone activity, obstacles and hindrances thought to contribute to the problem existence can be negated or have their impact lessened by crafting proactive responses. After mapping out our driver diagram, it is time to put our PDSA cycle plan into place. This is where our practice, discipline, inquiry step of our core principles comes into place. And remembering that failures may occur is not the problem, but that we fail to learn from them would be the problem. We want to make sure that we are always revisiting and assessing along the way and making changes as we go. Most often, improvement projects are framed within the iterative PDSA design for the cyclic exploration, testing, and evaluation of improvement initiatives. Similar to the fishbone model, drivers in the model, and the change ideas associated with each driver, it necessitates a determination as to which elements are the most attainable given contextual constraints. Using PDSA cycles to collect measurable data allows participants to determine whether an improvement effort really resulted in an improvement. Respectively, the PDSA cycle moves from plan to action and is based on iterative learning arising from the completion of the cycle. The PDSA cycle above generally begins with devising a plan for achieving the aim. Due to the nature of the PDSA framework, the models do not require the researchers to specify ahead of time all the elements of an intervention, since the practitioners participating in the design and implementation data inform an iterative design process that often transforms the interventions. The final phase, or ACT phase, is to put those into action, not only what is learned from the data presented, but to focus as well on the impact that the new learning arising from the conducting of a trial and error approach, and such a PDSA cycle assumes that. As a staff, it's important for me to note here that my staff are still learning. We are still scaling. We are learning each and every week, and we continue to revisit this process. It is not something that one professional development session solved and put into place and began to work seamlessly. They are still wrapping their heads around it, which tells me that a one-and-done approach will not work if you are going to be serious about implementing improvement science into your school as your framework for improvement. On the surface, what we can see playing out in this case is that staff are leading an improvement initiative in their school. But what we do not see is the deep cognitive underpinning of leadership development, teachers becoming leaders through knowledge or skills development in using improvement science for organizational improvement. The ability to solve problems of practice is a skill not normally developed in either teacher prep programs or other graduate coursework in education. The unique experience being developed at JCEC can happen in all schools, though. While covert in the implicit actions and embedded within the project, I integrated several major educational leadership outcomes into the experience. Transformational education leaders manage and develop staff members' professional skills and practices in order to drive student learning and achievement. Transformational education leaders cultivate a caring and inclusive school community dedicated to student learning, academic success, and the personal well-being of every student. And transformational education leaders also coordinate resources, time, structures, and roles effectively to build the instructional capacity of the teachers and other staff in their building. So as we continue to scale up, it's important to note collaborative leadership by those in non-designated or titled leadership roles cannot occur spontaneously. Specific opportunities must be created so that skills can be modeled and then practiced. The case presented here offers some insight about the type of professional development contexts in which these skills could be developed. The context must be intentional, that is, concrete projects serve as the site where theoretical constructs may be practiced on real-world problems. Annual school initiatives are particularly well suited for affording opportunities to practice leadership skills development. Opportunities for leadership development must be meaningful. Meaningful collaborations do not happen spontaneously, and trust and team building are necessary prerequisites for building foundational skills and dispositions. The leadership goal is in providing opportunities for teachers to see themselves as action researchers. As leaders in decision making, the improvement project lends itself a window of opportunity for teachers to learn and use improvement and quality-oriented tools and frameworks as methods for making evidence-based decisions. We know that collaborative leadership skills must be intentionally developed, especially in those who occupy leadership niches that lack formal educational leadership titles, such as school principal or district supervisor. Often the professional development of non-traditional leaders happens by chance, and unless intentional, these non-traditional leaders are often left powerless due to a lack of foundational leadership knowledge for practice. With the ability to literally transform schools, improvement science frameworks should transfer to areas other than school improvement. Our hope is that these external frameworks, once internalized, open up opportunities for meaningful communication and shared ideas for improvement across all educational contexts.